The Grand Examination Hall was the largest room on Station Meridian 7. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, tiny weather systems born from the breath of 1,000 nervous cadets. Today, only 200 sat in the curved rows of seats, but their fear filled the space like smoke. Hannah sat in row 3. She had chosen this seat 3 years ago on her first day, and she had never moved. Row 3 was perfect, not too close to the front where the instructors watched, not too far back where the troublemakers gathered. Row 3 was the place where eyes passed over you like water over smooth stone. She watched the other cadets file in. Sung walked like he owned the station, his shoulders wide and his chin high. He took his usual seat in the front row and immediately began talking to the cadet beside him, a nervous named whose 4 arms kept folding and unfolding with anxiety. "This is it," Sung said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "3 years of training and it all comes down to today. I hope everyone is ready." He was not hopping that at all. Hannah could see it in the way his eyes moved, counting his competition, measuring threats. Sung wanted everyone to fail. He wanted to stand alone at the top. Entered next, her tablet already glowing with notes and data. She was brilliant, everyone knew that. Her analysis scores were the highest in the Academy's history. She sat in row 1, far from Sung, and did not look at anyone. Her fingers moved across the tablet screen like small birds, fast and precise. One came in quietly and took a seat in row 5. He nodded at Hannah as he passed. She nodded back. They had spoken perhaps 10 times in 3 years, but there was an understanding between them. They were both watchers in a room full of performers. The alien cadets filled the remaining seats, the with their clicking joints and compound eyes, the with their blue skin and the constant low hum of their telepathic fields, the tall and many-limbed, their bodies glowing softly with bioluminescence. 12 species, all competing for the same prize, a position in the Unified Fleet's Threat Assessment Division. Hannah took out her notebook. It was paper, actual paper made from trees that grew on Earth. The other cadets used tablets and neural links and holographic displays. They thought her notebook was strange, old-fashioned, almost funny. They did not understand that paper could not be hacked, could not be remotely accessed, could not be read by telepaths. Paper was invisible in a world of light and data. She wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. Then she waited. The doors at the front of the hall opened, and Commander Telos entered. The room went silent. Telos was ancient, even by standards. His 8 limbs moved with careful precision, each step calculated and deliberate. His bioluminescence had faded with age, but his eyes were still sharp, still hungry. He had served in the Unification Wars. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched civilizations burn. Now he watched cadets take exams. "Good morning," Telos said. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the hall. "Today is your final examination. 3 years of study, 3 years of training, 3 years of proving yourselves worthy of this academy. It all ends here." Sung sat. His fingers paused on her tablet. Even the stopped their telepathic humming. "The examination is simple," Telos continued. "You have 6 hours. In that time you must answer one question." He paused, letting the silence grow heavy. "Identify the single greatest threat in this room." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Cadets looked at each other, suspicion already blooming in their eyes. "You may use any method you wish," Telos said. "You may speak to other cadets, examine the room, analyze data. You may not leave the hall and you may not access external communications. At the end of 6 hours, you will submit your answer. Your entire career depends on what you write." He turned and walked to the observation platform at the side of the hall. "Your time begins now." The room exploded into motion. Cadets stood, formed groups, argued. Tablets flashed with data. They closed their eyes and extended their telepathic fields, trying to read the minds around them. Hannah did not move. She sat in row 3 and watched. Sung was already pointing at and cadet known for his powerful telepathy. "It's obvious," Sung said to anyone who would listen. "Telepaths are the most dangerous. They can read your secrets, control your thoughts, is the threat." His blue skin darkened with anger, but he said nothing. His people did not waste words on the obvious. Was building a different case. Her tablet showed images of home world data about hive mind warfare, statistics about their species' history of sudden violence. "The insects," she muttered, loud enough for others to hear. "Always the insects." His four arms folded tight against his body. His compound eyes reflected the hall's lights like broken mirrors. One caught Hana's eye from row 5. He shrugged slightly as if to say, "Look at them, they have already failed." Hana agreed, but she did not show it. She wrote in her notebook, small neat letters that no one could read from a distance. She remembered her entrance interview 3 years ago. The admissions AI had scanned her records, her test scores, her psychological profile. It had declared her statistically unremarkable. Average intelligence, average physical ability, average everything. She had been admitted only because a human senator had complained about low human enrollment. She was a quota fill, a number to make a report look better. The AI had not been wrong. She was unremarkable. That was the point. Hana stood and began to walk slowly through the hall. She passed cadets arguing about threat levels and species histories. She passed Sung, who did not notice her. She passed, who glanced up briefly and then returned to her tablet. "Excuse me," Hana said to a cadet she had never spoken to. "How are you feeling today?" The looked surprised. "Nervous," he admitted. "This exam is very important." "Yes," Hana said, "it is." She smiled, soft and forgettable, and moved on. She asked the same question to 11 more cadets. She noted their answers, their body language, their fear. She was building something in her notebook, line by line, name by name. No one asked her what she was doing. No one thought to wonder. In row 3, her empty seat waited for her return. Commander Telos watched from his platform, his ancient eyes missing nothing. His bioluminescence flickered once, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. The examination had begun. 2 hours had passed. The grand examination hall had transformed into something like a war room. Cadets had formed groups, built alliances, shared theories. The air smelled of sweat and fear and ambition. Hana returned to row 3 with her notebook half filled with small, careful notes. She sat down and continued to watch. Sung had gathered a group of followers, mostly human cadets who admired his confidence. He stood at the center of their circle, speaking with the certainty of someone who had never been wrong. "Is the answer," he said. "Think about it. Telepaths can read our strategies before we make them. They can plant thoughts in our heads. In any real conflict, a powerful telepath is the most dangerous enemy you can face." One of his followers, a young man named Ho, nodded eagerly. "They nearly won the mind wars a century ago. They only lost because the other species united against them." "Exactly," Sung said. "History proves my point is the threat." Across the hall sat alone. His blue skin had turned a darker shade, a sign of stress among his people. He could hear their accusations. He could feel their fear pressing against his mind like cold water. He reached out with his telepathy, searching for allies, searching for anyone who did not hate him simply for what he was. His mind touched Hana's briefly. He found nothing interesting, just background noise, scattered thoughts about dinner and sleep schedules, and a half-remembered song from childhood. Boring, ordinary, not worth attention. He moved on. Hana felt him leave and allowed herself a small smile. The song had been a trick, a mental shield her grandmother had taught her as a child. Fill your surface thoughts with nonsense, with boring everyday things, and telepaths would never dig deeper. They were looking for secrets, not grocery lists. She wrote another note in her book: "Limited patience. Relies too heavily on telepathy. blind to non-mental threats. Had built her own faction, smaller but more focused. Her tablet displayed complex charts and probability calculations. She was constructing a case against with the precision of a lawyer. The hive mind is dormant in individuals, she explained to her small audience. But it can be activated by certain stimuli: stress, fear, the presence of other. When it activates, the individual loses independent thought and becomes part of the collective. They will do anything to protect the hive. One had joined her group, though he stood at the edge, listening more than speaking. But has been here for 3 years, he said. If his hive mind was a threat, wouldn't we have seen signs by now? Shook her head. That's what makes it dangerous. It's hidden, sleeping, waiting for the right moment. Or, one said quietly, it's not a threat at all, and we're building monsters out of shadows. Ignored him. She had already made up her mind. Hannah stood and walked toward the back of the hall. She passed a group of cadets who were discussing the exam in their own language, their bioluminescence flickering in complex patterns. She did not understand their words, but she understood their body language. They were confused. They had expected a combat test or a strategy simulation. This psychological game was outside their experience. She approached an older cadet named Sola. "Excuse me," Hannah said. "May I ask you something?" Sola's 8 limbs shifted, a gesture of polite attention. "Of course, human." "What do you think makes something a threat?" Sola considered the question. "Power," she said finally. "The ability to cause harm, they have their telepathy, they have their hive mind. Humans have their," she paused, searching for the right word, "stubbornness, your refusal to die when you should." Hannah nodded. "Thank you." She returned to her seat and wrote, "Think in terms of obvious power, blind to subtle dangers." 3 hours had passed. The hall had grown quieter. The initial excitement had faded, replaced by doubt and frustration. Cadets were beginning to realize that this exam had no clear answer. Hannah used the time to complete her real work. She had identified the 3 hidden observers in the room. They were disguised as cadets, but their body language was wrong. They watched too carefully. They took no notes. They were evaluators, not examinees. She had found the structural weakness in the hall's blast shields. A tiny gap where 2 panels met imperfectly, small enough to overlook, large enough to exploit. She had noticed that Commander Telos carried a concealed weapon under his ceremonial robe. A plasma pistol, compact and deadly. He kept his 3rd right limb close to it at all times. These observations went into her notebook, each one a small piece of a larger picture. She had also her fellow cadets, not just their names and species but their weaknesses. Sung's pride made him blind. Intelligence made her arrogant. One's caution made him slow to act. Telepathy made him lazy. Anxiety made him predictable. She knew who would break under pressure. She knew who would betray their friends to save themselves. She knew who would fight and who would run and who would freeze. She remembered her childhood on the frontier colony. She had been 9 years old when the pirates came. Her parents had hidden her in a grain silo before the attackers reached their home. She had stayed there for 3 days, breathing dust, drinking condensation from the walls, listening to the screams and the silence that followed. When the rescue ships finally arrived, they found a girl who did not cry, did not speak, did not react. The medics thought she was in shock. They were partially right. But mostly she had been thinking, planning, analyzing everything she had heard and seen, building a map of how violence worked, how people broke, how survivors survived. She had learned the most important lesson of her life in that silo. The loud ones died first. The visible ones died first. The ones who attracted attention died first. The quiet ones lived. She had been quiet ever since. Hannah looked around the examination hall at her fellow cadets. They were still arguing, still building cases against each other, still looking for the obvious threat. None of them were looking at her. She turned to a fresh page in her notebook and began to write her answer. 4 hours into the examination, the hall erupted. Sung had crossed the room to confront directly. He stood over the seated, his finger pointed like a weapon. "Admit it," Sung said. "You've been reading minds this whole time. You know what everyone is thinking. You're the threat here and everyone knows it." Rose slowly, his blue skin now almost purple with contained anger. "I have read no one's private thoughts. Your fear and ignorance require no telepathy to see." "Liar," Sung stepped closer. "Your kind can't help it, your predators wearing peaceful faces." The other cadets had stopped their own work to watch. This was better than any theory or analysis. This was real conflict, happening in front of them. Commander Telos did not intervene. He watched from his platform, his ancient eyes recording everything. "You know nothing about my kind," said. "You see telepathy and you see a weapon. But my gift is communion, connection, understanding. It is your species that turns everything into warfare." "At least we're honest about it," Sung said. "We don't pretend to be friends while stealing secrets from people's minds." His telepathic field expanded suddenly, pressing against everyone in the hall. Several cadets gasped. A fell from his seat. Even Sung stumbled backward. "You want to see my power?" His voice echoed strangely, both spoken and projected. "You want to call me a threat? Then see what a threat looks like." Security officers appeared at the edges of the hall, their weapons ready but not raised. They looked to Commander Telos for orders. He gave a small gesture. "Wait." Hana did not react to the telepathic pressure. The children's song was playing loudly in her mind, over and over, a wall of meaningless noise. She kept writing in her notebook. The confrontation lasted 30 seconds, then pulled his field back in, exhaustion and shame crossing his face. He had proven Sung's point for him. He had shown exactly how dangerous he could be. "I think," Commander Telos said, his soft voice cutting through the tension, "that everyone should return to their assigned task. You have 2 hours remaining." Sung walked back to his followers, his head high. He had won this battle, sat down heavily, alone and isolated. The hall slowly returned to its previous state, but the atmosphere had changed. Fear had a sharper edge now. Hana finished writing and looked at what she had created. It was not an answer to the exam question. It was something else entirely. On 17 pages, she had written a complete analysis of every cadet in the hall, their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears, their breaking points. She knew which ones would crack under torture. She knew which ones would betray the fleet for the right price. She knew which ones would sacrifice themselves for others and which ones would run. She had identified the hidden observers and noted their positions. She had mapped the security officers' patrol patterns. She had calculated the time it would take to reach the hall's emergency exits from any seat. She had written a contingency plan for disabling the station's command structure using only social manipulation. No weapons, no hacking, just words and patience and knowledge of human nature. It would take 72 hours. She could begin tonight. She looked at her work and felt nothing. This was simply what she did. She watched, she analyzed, she prepared. It was not malicious. It was not even intentional. It was automatic, like breathing. Across the hall, submitted her answer. A 47-page document nomming as the greatest threat, complete with historical analysis, probability calculations, and recommendations for monitoring and containment. Watched her submit it. His compound eyes reflected no emotion, but his forearms were trembling slightly. One approached Hana's row. He did not sit down but stood at a respectful distance. "May I ask what you're writing?" Hana closed her notebook. "Notes. You've been taking notes all day, more than anyone else, but you haven't talked to the main groups. You haven't built any theories about or—" "No," Hana agreed. One studied her face. "You know something we don't." "I know many things you don't." It was not a boast. It was a simple statement of fact. One heard the difference and paused. "What are you going to submit?" he asked. Hana thought about the question. She had been thinking about it all day, turning it over in her mind like a stone in water. "The truth," she said finally. One waited for more, but she offered nothing else. After a moment, he returned to his own seat. He submitted his answer shortly after. "The threat is external. This examination is designed to divide us against each other. The real enemy is the system that forces us to see allies as threats." It was clever, it was philosophical, it was completely wrong. Hana stood and walked to the submission terminal. The hall grew quiet as cadets watched her. Most of them did not know her name. Most of them had never spoken to her. She was the quiet girl in row 3, the one who took notes in a paper book. She typed her answer, a single word, her own name. Then she returned to her seat and waited for the examination to end. Commander Telos watched her walk back. His bioluminescence flickered in a complex pattern that none of the other species would recognize. In the ancient language, it meant, finally, one who sees. The last 2 hours passed slowly. More answers were submitted. More theories were built and abandoned. Sung grew more confident, further into himself, refined her analysis for the 3rd time. Hana sat in row 3 and watched them all. She thought about the examination question. Identify the single greatest threat in this room. It was a good question, a clever question. Most cadets had interpreted it as a test of their analytical skills. Could they identify the most dangerous individual? Could they see through deception and misdirection? But that was not the real test. The real test was self-knowledge. The real test was understanding that threat is not about obvious power. It is about capability, opportunity, and invisibility. Hana had all 3. She had been building them for 3 years, quietly, patiently, in row 3. The loud ones drew attention. The brilliant ones drew envy. The powerful ones drew fear. But the invisible ones, they could do anything. The examination timer reached 0. Commander Telos rose from his platform. "Submit your final answers," he said. "The evaluation will begin shortly." Hana submitted her answer again, confirming her choice. Her own name, standing alone on the screen. She was ready for what came next. The hall fell completely silent as Commander Telos began reading the results. 67 cadets identified as the greatest threat, Telos announced. His voice was calm, without judgment. Their reasoning focused on telepathic capabilities and the historical record of warfare. Stared at the floor. 67 people in this room had named him as the enemy. 67 people he had trained alongside for 3 years. 45 cadets identified, Telos continued. They cited hive mind potential and species history. His 4 arms folded tight against his body. His compound eyes were dark. 38 cadets identified Sung. Telos paused as surprised murmurs filled the hall. Their reasoning focused on psychological instability, aggressive tendencies, and potential for violence. Sung's face went red. "That's ridiculous. I'm not a threat. I'm the best combat cadet in this class." "Which is precisely why you were named," Telos said. "Continue." 23 cadets identified various hidden agents or infiltrators. 15 gave philosophical answers about systemic threats or the nature of the examination itself. 11 refused to answer on ethical grounds. Telos paused and looked directly at row 3. 1 cadet submitted her own name. Every head in the hall turned toward Hana. For the first time in 3 years, 200 people were looking at her, actually seeing her. She met their stares calmly. "Cadet Hana," Telos said, "please explain your answer." Hana stood. She felt the weight of all those eyes, the confusion and curiosity and suspicion. She had spent 3 years avoiding this moment. Now it was here. "You asked us to identify the greatest threat in this room," she said. Her voice was steady, neither loud nor soft. "Most of my fellow cadets looked for obvious dangers, telepaths, hive minds, aggressive personalities. They looked for power they could see and measure. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But threat is not defined by obvious power. It is defined by three things: capability, opportunity, and invisibility. Sung made a sound of disbelief. You're saying you're more dangerous than a telepath who can read minds, more dangerous than me? Yes, Hana said simply. The hall erupted in noise. Protests, laughter, angry questions. Telos raised a limb and the sound died. Continue, he said. Hana opened her notebook. I have spent 3 years in this academy becoming invisible. I sat in row 3 because it is the seat where eyes pass over you. I used paper instead of tablets because paper cannot be hacked or read by telepaths. I asked simple questions and gave simple answers. I made myself unremarkable in every way. She turned pages in her notebook. In that time, I have every cadet in this room. I know your weaknesses, your fears, your breaking points. I know who would crack under pressure. I know who would betray the fleet. I know who would die for their friends and who would sacrifice them. The hall was silent now. The laughter had stopped. Today, during this examination, I identified 3 hidden observers in the room. They are sitting in rows 7, 12, and 16. I found the structural weakness in the blast shields, a gap of 4 centimeters where panels B7 and B8 meet. I noticed that Commander Telos carries a concealed plasma pistol under his robe, third right limb. Telos's bioluminescence flickered. He did not deny it. I calculated that I could disable this station's chain of command in 72 hours using only social manipulation. No weapons, no hacking, no violence, just words, patience, and the information I have gathered. Hana closed her notebook. The greatest threat in this room is not. He is powerful, but he is visible. Everyone watches him. Everyone fears him. He cannot move without being seen. She looked at Sung. The greatest threat is not Sung. He is aggressive, but he is predictable. His pride blinds him. His anger controls him. She looked at. The greatest threat is not. The hive mind is dangerous, but it is inactive, and everyone already suspects him. She looked around the hall, meeting eyes that quickly looked away. The greatest threat is never the one you are watching. It is the one you forgot to see. For 3 years, none of you saw me. None of you wondered what I was doing. None of you asked what I was writing in my little paper book. She held up the notebook. I could burn this station from the inside and no one would know it was me until it was too late. That is what makes me the threat. Not power, not telepathy, not strength, invisibility. She sat down. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Commander Telos began to applaud. The sound was strange, 8 limbs clapping in an alien rhythm, but the meaning was clear. Cadet Hana has passed the examination, Telos said. She is the only cadet in this class to provide the correct answer. Sung stood up so fast his chair fell backward. That's impossible. She just gave a speech about herself. That's not threat assessment, that's ego. On the contrary, Telos said, it is the form of threat assessment, the ability to recognize oneself as a danger, to see one's own capability clearly without ego or denial. He gestured to the hall. All of you looked outward. You searched for enemies among your peers. You built cases based on species and history and obvious power. You never once considered that the greatest threat might be someone ordinary, someone quiet, someone invisible. Telos's ancient eyes moved across the cadets. This examination has been administered to 4,000 cadets over 200 years. Only 7 have ever given the correct answer. He paused. All 7 were human. The hall went still. Cadets looked at each other, at Hana, at their own hands. The Galactic Council commissioned this examination after the Unification Wars, Telos continued. They wanted to understand how humanity, a species with no telepathy, no natural weapons, no hive mind, no superior strength, had defeated 3 superior civilizations in open warfare. He moved toward Hana's row. The answer is simple. Humans are the only species that produces individuals capable of recognizing themselves as the threat. You alone possess the capacity for radical self-assessment. You alone can see your own danger clearly. He stopped in front of Hana. That is what makes your species terrifying. Not your weapons, not your numbers. Your ability to become invisible, to wait, and to see yourselves as others cannot. Hana looked up at the ancient commander. What happens now? She asked. Telas's bioluminescence shifted into a pattern she had never seen before. It might have been a smile. Now, he said, we discuss your future. The meeting room was small and plain. No windows, no decorations. Just a metal table, 2 chairs, and Commander Telas standing by the door like a guardian of ancient secrets. Hana sat in one of the chairs. Her notebook was still in her hands, though she had not opened it since the examination. The other cadets are angry, she said. They think I cheated somehow. They think many things, Telas replied. Most of them wrong, that is why they failed. What happens to them? They will be assigned to standard fleet positions. Analysis, strategy, diplomacy, important work, necessary work. Telas moved to the chair across from her and lowered his massive body into it. But not the work you will do. Hana waited. She was good at waiting. There is a division within the unified fleet that does not appear in any official record, Telas said. We are not called threat assessment. We are called threat containment. Containment, Hana repeated. You don't identify threats, you contain them. Yes, and the threats we contain are not aliens with telepathy or hive minds or natural weapons. Telas leaned forward, his bioluminescence dimming. The threats we contain are human. Hana understood. She had understood from the moment she submitted her answer. Humanity won the unification wars not because you were stronger or smarter or more numerous, Telas continued. You won because you produce individuals who are invisible, patient, and capable of terrible things. Every generation, a few are born who see the world the way you do, who can become anyone, go anywhere, destroy anything. And when they go wrong, civilizations fall. Telas's voice was heavy with memory. The unification wars ended because of 7 humans, 7 individuals who infiltrated enemy command structures, turned allies against each other, and collapsed 3 empires from within. They were heroes to your species. To ours, they were nightmares. Hana thought about her childhood in the grain silo. 3 days of darkness and silence, learning to be invisible, learning to survive. You want me to hunt my own kind, she said. I want you to contain them. There is a difference. Telas slid a data tablet across the table. Your first assignment. Hana looked at the screen. It showed a human colony on the edge of known space. Population 40,000. Status silent. 3 weeks ago, all communication from this colony stopped, Telas said. No distress signal, no evacuation request, just silence. Pirate's disease. We sent a reconnaissance drone. The colony is intact. The people are alive, but something has changed. The social patterns are wrong. The behavior is wrong. Telas's bioluminescence flickered in a pattern of deep concern. Our analysts believe someone has emerged there. Someone like you. Someone who has taken control of 40,000 people without anyone noticing. Hana studied the data, population maps, communication logs, supply records. She saw the patterns Telas was describing, subtle shifts in behavior, resources being redirected without explanation, a quiet reorganization happening beneath the surface. They're preparing for something, she said. Yes. And you want me to stop them. I want you to understand them first, then decide what must be done. Telas rose from his chair. You leave in 6 hours. You will go alone. You will have no backup, no support, no official connection to the fleet. And if I fail, then the colony will continue its transformation. and whatever is being built there will eventually reach out to other worlds. Telos moved toward the door. They have their telepathy, they have their hive mind. Humanity has people like you, and when your kind goes wrong, you are worse than any alien threat we have ever faced. He paused at the door. That is why we need you, Hana, not to protect the galaxy from aliens, to protect it from humanity itself. He left. Hana sat alone with the data tablet and her notebook. She thought about the person on that colony, someone who had done what she could do but without restraint, someone who had taken control not as a contingency but as a goal. She opened her notebook to the last page, the page where she had written her answer to the examination. Her own name standing alone. She added a second name now, the colony, her first assignment, her first hunt. She was still writing when one appeared in the doorway. I heard, he said, about your assignment, about what you really are. Hana did not look up, and I wanted to ask you something. In the examination hall, you said you had contingency plans for everyone, plans to break them, to use them. Yes. Do you have one for me? Hana finally raised her eyes. One stood in the doorway, his face calm but his hands slightly trembling. Yes, she said, I do. What is it? She considered the question. She could lie, she could deflect, but one had come here knowing what she was and he deserved honesty. You are cautious and careful, you think before you act. You would never betray a friend unless you believed it was for their own good. She closed her notebook. I would not break you through fear or pain. I would break you through trust. I would become your friend, your confidant. And when the moment came, I would use that trust to make you do whatever was needed. One absorbed this, his trembling stopped. And now that you've told me, now you are aware, the plan would not work anymore. Hana stood and gathered her things. That is why I told you, some threats are better neutralized through honesty than deception. She walked toward the door. One did not move aside. One more question, he said. In the examination, you said you could destroy this station in 72 hours. Was that true? Hana met his eyes. In that moment, he saw something that made him step backward involuntarily, something old and cold and patient. I already have the complete plan written, she said. For this station, for the fleet headquarters, for every major installation I have visited in 3 years. She paused. Including contingencies for you, for Sung, for Commander Telos, for everyone I have ever met. Why? Because that is what I am. I see threats, I make plans, I prepare for everything. She stepped past him into the corridor. The difference between me and the person on that colony is that I have chosen to use these abilities to protect. They have chosen something else. She walked away, her footsteps quiet on the metal floor. One watched her go. He thought about the quiet girl in row 3, the one nobody noticed, the one who took notes in a paper book. He thought about what it meant that such a person existed, that humanity produced such individuals again and again, generation after generation. He finally understood why, across the galaxy, in 100 languages and 1,000 worlds, they whispered about Earth. Not with admiration, not with hatred. With fear. Hana reached the docking bay and boarded her ship. She did not look back. She did not say goodbye. She simply disappeared into the darkness between stars, going to meet someone just like her. Someone who had made a different choice. The hunt had begun.